Good afternoon and welcome to The Insurance Lawyer, the podcast where we discuss topics concerning claims and lawsuits between insurance companies and their policyholders. I am your host, Evan Schwartz, founding partner of Schwartz, Conroy & Hack. The firm represents businesses and individual policy holders in insurance claims and lawsuits, claims against their insurance companies, helping policyholders get their claims paid. Today, we're going to talk about long-term care insurance. And I'm so pleased here to have my partner, Michail Hack, who, together with me over many, many years, have handled multiple claims and lawsuits involving long-term care insurance all over the United States. One thing that I want to start before we get Michail rolling here is that the long-term care industry changed over the recent years. When long-term care insurance started getting sold many, many years ago, the policies were very generous. They often had lifetime benefits with cost of living increases. They had cash reimbursement benefits. They had all kinds of amazing benefits that are really no longer sold in the modern era. The modern era, the policies are much more limited. But because these policies were non-cancelable, meaning if you pay your premiums, you can keep it no matter what, then there are many, 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 many hundreds of thousands and millions of these policies still in force in the United States. And many of the aged of our population, most typically, need access to those policies. The companies that sold them have largely engaged in an unprofitable venture. And as a result, quite often you will see long-term care claims from these old policies getting disputed, denied, or terminated. And that's what we see in our practice. So what we're going to do today is just talk about some of the basics concerning these claims. And Michail, again, happy to have you here.
Nice to be here, Evan.
So let's start with talking about the types of policies that you see out there and that exist in the long-term care space.
Well, like you said earlier, a lot of the good policies are the older policies that people have been paying for a long time. And the newer policies that I've seen that come in are called reimbursement policies. And that's where, you have to have someone come in and take care of you. And then they have to give you an invoice, and then you submit it to the carrier for approval, and then the carrier will pay for the invoice. But the better policies and the ones that I really kind of need are just the cash policies. And those policies just give you a daily indemnity when you satisfy the definition of disability or the definition of needing long-term care. So those can be quite generous.
So does that mean that they will just pay you an amount of money without you proving that the services were actually rendered by somebody?
They're probably going to ask for monthly proof of loss, wherein you have to state who is taking care of you. And generally, they require some type of state registration, whether you're a state-certified home health care nurse or you're in a state-licensed facility, such as a nursing home, assisted living facility, an adult daycare facility, and they all have to be accredited facilities. However, there's a few policies out there that actually have a home health care, what's the word I'm looking for, the amendment to the policy, or a rider that allows your spouse to actually stay home and take care of you, and they get paid the daily indemnity.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of cases in that situation where if the spouse is taking care of you, they have to pay, and they don't have to prove that what you were doing all day long, just that you're living together and that you have your spouse taking care of you. And those policies are an amazing benefit. But the daily rates of these policies, it's important to look at the declarations page or the schedule page of your policy to see what you were getting paid for how long, and the cost of living adjustment. Some of these policies will have a maximum amount that they will pay for the entire life of the policy. Some of them will have no lifetime maximum, in which case whatever benefits available to you can continue to increase with the cost of living adjustment and pay for as long as you're alive. So let's talk a little bit, Michail, about these specific types of services that are available under these policies.
Yeah, well, I mean, the services that you see that are typically reimbursed would include nursing home services, home health care nursing services, services for assisted living facilities, and adult daycare services. And also, some of these policies will have riders where they'll actually pay to have your home modified so that you can enter and exit a tub more easily or ride up and down the stairs on one of those home escalator type things. And then some of these policies are kind of elastic that they allow you to work with the insurer to cover alternative plans of care. And so that's kind of a nifty feature.
All right. So, Michael, what do you have to do in order to qualify for benefits under these policies? What does someone need to prove?
Well, it's a pretty ubiquitous feature on every long-term care policy that I've seen. They have one that's really kind of a physical qualification, and one is a mental qualification. And the physical qualification says that, I'm trying to phrase it, you need assistance with 2 or 3 out of 5, what they like to call ADLs, activities of daily living. And typically you'll see bathing, eating, dressing, toileting, continence, and transfer.
Let's get into that a little bit more. So let's go through each of these activities of daily living, which are called ADLs under these policies. And let's talk about what you've seen in terms of what that means. So let's start with bathing. What do they mean when they say bathing?
Well, that's exactly right. And what do you mean by bathing? Does it mean giving yourself a sitz bath, or does it mean getting into a shower, or does it mean getting in and out of a bathtub? That's kind of they're nuanced areas that we've tended to exploit for our clients' benefits. But a lot of the policies will say that you need standby assistance. And that's not a defined term. Do you need standby assistance to get in and out of the bathtub? Do you need standby assistance to help you eat or get dressed? So, toileting, not to get too far down the drain with this one, but what do they mean when you need assistance with toileting? I mean, if you need help getting on and off the toilet, and if you do, is that the same as transferring, where you need help getting in and off of an easy chair and moving to the dining room table? I would argue that it covers both. If you can't get up and down without standby assistance, or someone's just there for your safety, I would argue that toileting and transferring, which is 2 out of the 5 activities of daily living, are covered under that policy.
We have had a number of interesting cases, and first thing you have to do really is look at what the definitions of each of those words mean. And each policy might have a slightly different definition that's going to tell you whether or not some policies will say you're unable to do it. But usually they're going to define that further, because what does unable mean? Because a lot of them have to do with, can you safely do something? Is it safe for you to, bathe on your own? And if you have a risk of falling, or you have a risk of otherwise hurting yourself in entering or exiting either a tub or a shower, then that's going to be an issue. Eating, again, would have to do with your ability to actually feed yourself with utensils. And again, policy language. Dressing typically has to do with getting everything that you ordinarily wear on and off of yourself. So just because you can put on your shirt and maybe pull on your pants, but you can't get your shoes and socks on,
or you button your buttons,
correct, then you might have an issue under the policy. And what I want to know, Michael, is how do you see the insurance companies typically evaluate these for purpose of determining whether or not someone who says they need care meet 2 or 3 out of the 6 activities of daily living?
Generally speaking, they'll send out a healthcare nurse from an agency that does nothing but in-home evaluations. And she'll go to the insured's house and observe them in their environment and write a report. And when I say write a report, she really does nothing more than check a whole large list of boxes in a document that's about 40 pages long. And she submits that report, and based on that report, the insurance company will either honor its contract with the insured or issue a denial letter.
If you're an owner of one of these policies and you need to make a claim, do you need a doctor to say that you can't do those activities, or just one of these in-home evaluators, or is it some combination?
Well, I certainly wouldn't trust the in-home evaluator. I'm sure that insurance companies don't hire in-home evaluators based on their ability to accurately assess your condition. They hire home evaluators based on their ability to find that you don't require in-home assistance. So, to answer your question directly, it's really critical that prior to submitting a claim that you ensure you have strong support from your treating physicians or therapists or whoever else is treating you at that time.
Let's say you're suffering from some kind of pain, back pain, hip pain, leg pain. Do you think it's sufficient for you just to go to your primary care doctor to support it, or something more?
That's a good question, Evan. I'd be looking for a specialist, someone who specializes in hip, back, knee, or whatever type of pain. And also, I would look for objective test results like an EMG NCV, a nerve conduction study that would show nerve latency, the speed at which electrical signals travel between the affected area and your spine.
Okay, and why is it important to get those types of tests?
Well, pain is inherently subjective. There's no test out there right now that can show he's in pain. But there are tests that correlate strongly with pain, like an EMG, or even an MRI or an X-ray. If you see a bone pressing on a nerve, it's easy to determine that, that person's probably in a lot of pain right now.
Okay, and in terms of the cognitive aspect of these, you mentioned earlier that you see in these policies that there is a way to get paid under these policies if you're having some cognitive impairment. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, every policy, every long-term care policy naturally provides for people when they're aged and they contemplate the fact that you may suffer or may come to suffer from some type of dementia. So there are objective ways of demonstrating dementia. The most important way of demonstrating dementia is a neuropsychological evaluation, which is performed by a neuropsychologist. And a neuropsychologist will evaluate your brain in much the same way that a computer expert would evaluate the functioning of a processor in a computer. And if you're contemplating making a long-term care claim, you really ought to go out and get a neuropsychological evaluation first to ensure that you satisfy the definition of cognitive impairment in the long-term care policy. For really, one of the most important things about cognitive impairment that you see is that one of the definitions of disability for receiving long-term care benefits is that you're kind of a danger to yourself, that you need verbal cueing from another person to ensure that you won't cause harm to yourself or others.
Yeah, we've had a number of clients over the years where, there are certain things that they forget to do that could put themselves or others in danger. One of the classic examples of that is that they turn on the stove and then they just leave and forget that they turned on the stove, or forget to turn off the stove. Or they leave their home and they just leave the door open and walk out, which is less of a danger to themselves and others, but it's an indicator.
I guess it depends on your neighborhood.
Right, depending on your neighborhood is a very good point. But so there are certain things that someone does or doesn't do when they start to suffer from cognitive impairment in terms of how they remember and how they process information. That deterioration can put them at risk and put others around them at risk. And that often is what we'll call the trigger under insurance policies to get coverage. In terms of the forms of intellectual deterioration that you've seen Michael, can you give some examples of forms of cognitive impairment that you've seen that have helped people qualify for these types of benefits?
Well, certainly Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis all carry with it a cognitive component. So there are disease processes, in addition, of course, to adult dementia, including Alzheimer's, but also people may have a traumatic brain injury. So essentially, it's mostly organic causes. When I say organic, it isn't by psychological reasons. They have a sharp drop due to a disease process or a physical injury to the brain itself.
And who would you say are, besides the neuropsychologist, is there any other doctors that you think are typically part of the group of doctors that might support some form of cognitive impairment?
Naturally, a neurologist and a psychiatrist and a psychologist are all good people to evaluate decline in your intellectual function.
And you talked about neuropsychologists. Have you represented any clients that actually had only a neuropsychologist as their supporting doctor to say that they suffer cognitive impairment?
I don't know that I've ever had just a neuropsychologist support, although I suspect that would be enough. But typically, people are referred to neuropsychologists when they've already gone to their neurologist as the first doctor they see for a deteriorating mental condition, and they're referred to a neuropsychologist. So the answer is a neuropsychologist may be enough, but if you're seeing a neuropsychologist, you should get yourself to a doctor too to find out what's going on, what your condition is, and maybe is it reversible or can you arrest the progress of your mental decline?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So when you're talking about cognitive impairment, there are some doctors who are sort of the standard in the industry. And as Michael pointed out, if you think you're having cognitive impairment, memory loss, processing speed issues, fogginess, you probably are going to take your first step by going to your primary care doctor. But after that, the most likely next step is going to be a neurologist or a psychiatrist. And in the world of psychiatry, there are subspecialties like neuropsychiatry and forensic psychiatry as well. But those are going to be the preliminary steps. And then the neuropsychologist is someone that typically is referred by those other doctors because they sense or see when they examine someone that there's evidence of a cognitive problem, and that for purposes of verifying it, the neuropsychological testing that is done by a neuropsychologist is generally considered objective diagnostic testing to help support the fact that your complaints of memory loss and processing speed and those other things are verified, just as when Michael pointed out, getting an MRI or an X-ray or an EMG are objective tests that help diagnose complaints of pain due to some injury of the spine or injury of the bone.
You brought up a good point there, Evan. Speaking of objective testing, a lot of neuropsychologists, when they're just purely in the clinical setting and evaluating a patient who comes to them on referral, will not incorporate effort testing into the neuropsychological evaluation. Effort testing is to see if maybe you're just faking good or faking bad. And that's really important to an insurance company to see if they've incorporated effort testing into the neuropsychological evaluation. If they have not, I can pretty much guarantee you the insurance company is going to want you to submit to another neuropsychological evaluation.
So before we move on, I just want to point out that when you're looking at this cognitive impairment aspect of the trigger of coverage or the right to get benefits under a long-term care policy, again, it's important to look at the policy and see what the cognitive impairment causes you to be unable to do, because most of these policies will say that, you're a danger to yourself or others, or some of them will even say that it affects 2 or 3 out of the 6 activities of daily living, your cognitive impairment, in order to qualify for benefits. So it's kind of the mantra of all lawyers who do insurance recovery and things like long-term care, long-term disability, or any other type of coverage, the policy is the first place you start with to see what it is you need to do and what it is you need to do to qualify.
I should bring up just another point along with cognitive decline. I would say that 50% of our long-term care clients seeking long-term care benefits suffer from some type of cognitive degeneration. And that brings into mind the fact that you have to pay premiums on these policies. And an insured who's suffering from cognitive impairment, one of the first signs may be that they forget to pay the premium on their policy. And a lot of policies have a provision where you have a notification going to someone else as well. So if you forget to make your premium payment, the policy will say the carrier will mail the premium payment to another person who presumably is more competent than you are. And I think you have up to 2 months on most policies.
Well, that's a good point. And it's important as people age to be aware of the fact that they need to keep this policy that they may have been paying for many, many, many years, and they're getting to the point where they may need to access it, that they get their sort of ducks in a row and make sure that they don't lapse the policy and deprive themselves of a potentially substantial long-term care benefit that they've been paying for many, many years. So just switching to the claims process briefly, when someone is going to file one of these claims, Michail, you talked about in-home evaluations by nurses that are hired by the insurance companies. Is there any benefit to the person seeking benefits getting their own in-home evaluation by somebody like that?
Well, of course. You want someone that's fair and objective and isn't beholden to the insurance company, that they'll come in and assess you like an actual person and really take their time with you. And a really good objective report recording their observations.
Okay, and one other question. Are there other ways to help explain to an insurance company why it is that you are either limited or unable to perform some of these activities of daily living?
Well, I think that, of course, you should rely on people who have known the insured prior to the onset of the condition, and during the onset of the condition and after the onset of the limiting condition, to write a before, during, and after letter to the carrier explaining the duration and nature of the relationship and their own personal observations, that why he used to be out there mowing his lawn every day and fixing his car. He was having a difficult time, now screwing in a light bulb. Things like that can go a long way.
Right. So evidence that proves that you're entitled to the benefits under insurance policy, just like whether it's in the claims process or whether it's in a lawsuit, proof is proof, and proof includes specific descriptions by the insured themselves, the person who is suffering from the limiting or inability to perform activities of daily living, as well as their family, their daughter, their son, their husband, their wife, their sister, their brother.
Their long-term neighbor, their coworker.
Right. These are people who can say, hey, I've been over the house, over the last couple of months, and, Jane can't get on and off the toilet. I have to help her. She can't get her shoes and socks on. John can't get out of the chair. These are things that are proof that you are entitled to your benefits under these policies. And so besides the medical proof, besides the in-home nurse evaluation, all of these things, including friends and family and coworkers and neighbors, can be part of the support you need to get your claim paid. Well, that's all the time we have for today. And I want to thank Michail for joining me today. And thank you for listening today. And if you like the podcast, make sure to leave a review and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can visit Schwartz, Conroy, and Hack PC website at www.schlawpc.com for more information. I'm the insurance lawyer. Have a fantastic day.